run a comb through my hair and step out in the street.
Committed to excellence. Coming to you live from the KQCK radio station compound, nestled in the beautiful Santan Mountains. Marc J. Victor, world-renowned man of peace and attorney for freedom. In a world of coercion and war, a peaceful man stands tall. Now, for your weekly dose of freedom and peace. A peaceful man stands tall. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of peace himself, Marc J. Victor, brings to you the Attorney for Freedom Show.
Cool. Hey, you know, Joe, I was thinking, one thing about that introduction that I don't like, it's Megadeth, and you can't make it loud enough. I don't know if it's
true, huh?
I don't know how it's coming through to the listeners, but however it's coming through, it's just not loud enough.
Right,
So,
we can do that special via satellite. We can shoot that special blast down and make them all loud. Whoever's listening.
maybe we ought to come out first and say, "Hey, look, turn it up," you know, and then we can start the intro.
Maybe you can call the government for me and see if they can get that done.
Joe, it's show number 2. It's show number 2, the Attorney for Freedom show, and we're not pulling any punches here today.
What happened to the lights? Somebody turned the lights on?
We don't need any lights. This is show number 2. It's the Attorney for Freedom show. Today we got 2 special guests, actually, and other special people who are here as well. But Professor Butler Schaffer is going to be on the show today. And first off, if you don't know Butler Schaffer already, then you're not really connected to the whole freedom crowd. Would you agree with that, Ernie?
You know, he had roadies.
You need to know Butler Schaffer, but just in terms of somewhat of an introduction, I met Butler Schaffer when I was in law school. He was my constitutional law professor, and this guy was as out of the box as they come. I showed up a Republican. I was still a fan of Rush Limbaugh and Ronald. Figured out for myself the drug war, but that's about all I had figured out. And then I ran into Professor Butler Schaffer, and it was a series of, it kind of went like this after every class. I would go to his office and I'd say, "Hey, Butler," Butler's not a status guy. He says, "Don't call me Professor Schaffer if you're really caught up with titles." He says this on the first day, by the way. He says, "Call me God. That's fine. But if you're not, just call me Butler. That's my name, Butler." So I'd go into his office and I'd say, "Butler, if the government stopped doing this, whatever, fill in the blank, how would
you think it would work?"
Butler is famous at the law school for never, ever answering a question. Butler doesn't answer questions. He says, "Well, what do you think would happen, Mark?" And then, of course, I would come out and say, "Well, of course this would happen." Complete chaos, right? And then he would say, "Well, then what will happen?" Then I would have to think a little bit, right? Because normally that's the end of the story. If the government stops doing it, it's complete chaos. And so he would then say, "Well, then what would happen?" And then I would say, "Well, I suppose this would happen." And then he would say, "Well, then what would happen?" And then I would say, now I see what would happen. The free market somebody would step up and deal with that situation.
Freedom's the answer. What's the question?
Freedom was the answer. So I'd say, "Okay, fine, you're right about that." And I'd go home and I'd think up another one, and the next day would be a repeat of the same type of a thing. And that's just how things went with Butler Schaffer. And by the time I left law school, I was about as hardcore pro-freedom as you could possibly be. And then
you met me.
I ran into a guy named Ernie Hancock. And again, I don't know Ernie Hancock. Libertarian guerrilla activists known throughout the nation, all over the nation, feared all over the nation, even by libertarians. Because if you call yourself and you pretend to be for freedom, and you meet Ernie Hancock, he's going to straighten you out really fast. Ernie does the Freedom's Phoenix show, and he also does a show on, what's your...
We're on LRN.FM. It's Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock. We've been doing since February of 2003.
Yeah, and if you're on the Ernie Hancock show and you're not hardcore pro-freedom, good luck to you, because I think you're going to have a rough time on the show.
Most of my guests, I bet you over half of my guests are progressives.
That ought to be fun.
It is. I heard last week you had a tax assessor on. I'm like, yeah. And how much did you pay him to call?
Hey, you know
in?
what? Anybody can call into this show. Are we afraid of some argument? I'm not afraid of any person, any argument. Bring it on anytime. In addition to that, we got Mike Wasden here today, my friend of, 30 years or so, hardcore pro-freedom libertarian, and my wife Tracy, who may or may not say something during the course of this hour. And, of course, Joe is here, a man of freedom himself. Joe, do we have Butler Schaffer on the show yet?
We do.
Hey, Butler, how are you?
Pretty good. You?
Fantastic. Just to let you know, I got Ernie here. I got Mike Wasden here, and my wife Tracy is here. And
hey, Butler.
Just to let you know, we got a full house today.
All the backup you need.
All the backup. So how are things going with you, Butler?
Fine. I'm getting over a minor bronchial infection, but that's over and done with. So if I cough now and then, you'll understand why.
Glad to hear about that. First question that I had for you right out of the chute, I want to know, what is your take on this whole fiscal cliff chaos going on right now? The Republicans and the Democrats, it's a big, what I would call house of crazy up there. And I've been curious, and I've been waiting for the show to find time. What's your take on this whole fiscal cliff thing going on right now?
Another gimmicky way of getting people to fear the unknown, and the only solution for it, of course, is to embrace all of these experts that the state employs to work our way out of it. I find it kind of amusing that this is coming along about the same time that the of the end of the world comes up, December 21st. Maybe these boobs are just trying to take advantage of all the interest in the Mayan end of the world and say, well, it's not the end of the world, but at least we're going over a cliff. Maybe we can stop that.
Well, I thought that was yesterday.
Well, I did too. I thought it was the 12th, and somebody said no.
No, 21st.
So,
21st. Well, it depends who you ask. Are you Mayan?
No, I'm not Mayan. I'm just going by the traditional nut job.
Okay, so 21st. And what happens on the 22nd, Butler?
I don't know. Jay Leno had a funny line the other night. He said the 21st is a Friday. He said, "Wouldn't it be? That's just awful. You have the whole world come to an end on a Friday. And it spoils the weekend."
Well, hey, Butler, I know you've written pretty extensively since the time that I met you back in law school about 150 years ago. And if somebody was interested in all your writings, where would they go to find what it is that you've got to say? Your I would call miscellaneous ramblings on freedom.
Well, I can go to LouRockwell.com, and I've got a bunch of articles there. I had an interesting one up yesterday that has brought about maybe the best responses in the way of emails from people I've ever had on an article. It's called "Learning Begins from Within," and it's sort of an exploration of the difference between learning how to think, learning what to think. Because most schools today are organized around the premise that it's important for the school to teach children from grade school all the way up through graduate school what to think. You're supposed to think this particular way, rather than helping students learn how to think. And the Socratic method that you were describing before is the way I found of helping students learn how to think. And it goes through this process of continual questioning within your own mind. So is the learning going on within your own mind through a process of questioning, or is it going on through your absorbing expert information and ideas and so forth from outside your mind?
Butler, I can remember 20 years or so ago now in law school, and certain students in law school would sort of pipe up in the middle of class and say, "Hey, Butler, I read this case and I read that case, and I'm trying to understand. I can't really understand how the Supreme Court in this case came to this conclusion, and in that case came to that conclusion. And so, what do you think about that, or something? How do I understand that?" And you would say, "Fantastic, good for you. I'm glad you're confused about it, and keep kicking that one around and see what you come up with." And that was really your answer to them, which was keep playing around with that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I told students. My job is to put your mind in a state of turbulence. It's to confuse you. It's to frustrate you. You're going to learn all kinds of things. You're going to discover all kinds of things that don't quite pull together to make sense. And so what you have to do is figure out how to make sense out of that. Now, one way, of course, is just to take some authority figure's opinion and say, well, this is the correct answer. Well, first of all, I don't know if there ever is a correct answer on these situations. The process of exploring it. It's a little bit like saying, who is a better painter, Jackson Pollock or Vincent van Gogh? On that, and somebody else might have a different opinion. But you say, well, let's have an authoritative opinion. Let's see who really was the best painter.
And some of this stuff is scary for people. I mean, the thought that government might not be there to take care of things from cradle to grave, I think is just frankly scary or even terrifying for some people. That's why I use sometimes in my emails a tagline, "Don't be afraid of your freedom," because I think people really are afraid of their freedom. But a question that I've been asking you for 20 years now, and I'm trying to get you to change your answer, but secretly I kind of like your answer. I say, Butler, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic about where we are now in terms of reclaiming our freedom? And despite my inclinations, you constantly keep telling me you're optimistic about how things are going for freedom. So are you still optimistic? And if so, why?
Well, I would say, first of all, I would consider myself realistic rather than either optimistic or pessimistic. But in the sense of where all this is going, I think it's rather clear. And I think that people have to have some kind of Pollyanna-ish attitude about the world to think that everything is just wonderful. Voltaire's Dr. Pangloss, things are all for the best in this best of all possible worlds. A takeoff on the philosopher Leibniz story. And I see that I think Western civilization is finished. That was my last book that came out this year.
What do you mean by that, Butler? What do you mean when you say Western civilization is finished? That's a big statement.
The hegemony of the United States of America.
Yeah, you betcha. That sounds like Ernie. No, I think just take a look at any of the facets of our civilization has been premised. Economically, the old idea that you could create something, go out and sell it, become rich if you've accurately assessed the preferences and the tastes of the market. That's passé. What is now passes for economic wisdom in our corporate world is to be able to have enough pull in Washington to get the government to just give you a multi-trillion-dollar, or a billion-dollar, I should say, bailout.
We've been drug to get made and done decades ago. It's like right as it starts to go, it's a good time that it starts to come out and make that point. One thing, Butler, I wanted to talk to you about, make sure that we took opportunity of this, is that for the past months, the last half of this year, we at Freedom's Phoenix and on my show, we've been pushing on the concept that we as a society, Generation Next, has been dumbed down and contained to the point that they're innovation. They don't want it coming out of America. In fact, Michio Kaku, if I'm saying his name right, he did a presentation where he said, look, 100% of the PhD candidates at his university are foreign-born. If it wasn't for, I think they call it the HB1, the Genius Visa or something, there wouldn't be any innovations in any high-tech industry anywhere in the United States. And now that we're pushing the immigrants back to their home countries, they're going back to India and China and creating Silicon Valleys there. And he goes, this is a... We see Peter Thiel doing an Oxford debate with Jerry Kaparoff, the chess genius that went up against Big Blue from IBM and so on, and they were saying the same thing. They're going, our entire infrastructure is destructive of any kind of the old Yankee ingenuity, this American, entrepreneurial killed at its root, and that we as a country are not going, if it wasn't for the Genius Visas, we'd have nothing to provide as industries and new jobs for people. So all the things that you have said is that it is an atmosphere of innovation that has been stripped of the next generation. So I'm like, can you respond to that? I've been wanting to talk to you about it.
Well, yeah, it goes back to the point that I continue to make, and that is that civilizations are created by individuals, but they're destroyed by collectives. And you go back and take a look at the influences that generated Western civilization. What are they? And it wasn't some sort of a workers' alliance or some guild or something like that did the creative stuff. It was individuals. And in the area of art, in the area of literature, sciences, inventiveness, all kinds of areas. It's individuals who had some kind of a creative impulse, some of which was ended up not being all that worthwhile, so it would get dumped. Others would just sort of hang in there and eventually become part of the dominant thing within the culture. In time, and I find this reflected in the works of many historians, Carroll Quigley, Arnold Toynbee, the Durant, and others, the same impulse, that we have a creative phase, the mob sort of takes over, the political expression that Robert Oppenheimer spoke of. He said we have two ways of generating wealth in our culture. One is through the economic means, the other is through the political means. What's political meaning? Just taking what someone else has already produced and looting it.
And I think if you look at
it
out. I mean, the evidence supports what you're saying. If you look at societies that have had more collectivism, like, for example, the Soviet Union, I mean, what did they produce? I mean, what cars came out of the Soviet Union and now Russia? I mean, are we driving any wonderful vehicles? What wonderful inventions came out of them? I guess we got vodka, but I mean, really, are there things that come out of what came out of East Germany as compared to West Germany? And so we have lots of examples of places where individuals are allowed to pursue their own interests, right? We like to call that capitalism. When you got capitalism, you got people who are pursuing their own selfish interests and are creating things.
Oh, I know what I want to talk about.
You know what? Before you do, though, we've got some people out there I just want to address a couple of quick questions, and one of them is who the heck's the guy in the blue shirt? So, Ernie, introduce yourself to those folks that don't know you.
I'm Ernest Hancock. Yeah, a lot of people know me from a lot of stuff, but I publish Freedoms with an S, freedomsphoenix.com. I have my own radio show called Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock. I'm known for a lot of things. Probably what a lot of people have known me from is I'm the creator of the Ron Paul Lovolution logo, the Revolution. And we went around. I had nothing to do with the campaign. It didn't say vote Ron Paul. It was in endorsement of Ron Paul and his philosophy. And we, Ron, I tell you, he's going to be meeting. I don't know if it's not a secret anymore. Ron Paul is going to be Victor in January on his future as we're going to go advocate for freedom. And we have been very successful in doing that with Generation Next. They keep calling it Generation Next. And I tell you, if you have no idea what's coming, and it's been advocated by people like Butler Schaffer. Butler Schaffer has been an infection. We did hours. I spent a few days with Butler at his home last year doing 3 days of radio shows with hours afterwards recording video just to get the history of him from, heck, even his years in the late 50s, he and Jane, going up to the 60s and the Freedom College. I mean, just the history. You have no idea how much big... Butler, tell him. I placed, a detonation device at an appropriate time would have taken out the entire libertarian movement in one room, back in the day, right?
Oh yeah, there was a time, say 50 years ago, and this is not an exaggeration. People who would have considered themselves libertarians, if they didn't know each other personally, they knew each other by name. So that if I was going to take a trip to Milwaukee or someplace, somebody would say, well, be sure and look up Joe Schlock. And I would say, well, who's Joe Schlock? And I said, well, he's a libertarian. I said, my God, we've got a libertarian in Milwaukee? Sounds funny. It really does sound funny. But Rothbard had said one time, he said all the people who consider themselves libertarians could have fit within his apartment in New York. Murray had a very, very small apartment, as most apartments in New York are. Had a very small apartment. He was right. This was not an exaggeration.
And you know what else is neat? And to me, that's a good cause for optimism, because there really are a lot of people now who consider themselves. Beyond that, there are other people out there who actually are libertarians who still have never even heard the word libertarian. They don't identify themselves as libertarians because they just don't understand, like I think Joe is probably a good example. I mean, I met Joe because Joe was running a radio show called The Marijuana Report, and I'm known, doing criminal defense for almost 20 years. I've represented a few people with the green leafy substance, and I've been very outspoken to end the drug war. And so Joe invited me on his show, and I thought I'd show up like I always do with the marijuana crowd, and I hammer them over the head for freedom. And as I was bashing Joe over the head, he was kind of agreeing with all these things that I was saying. He said, you know what, I never heard this word libertarian, but I think it describes me perfectly well.
I've got the feeling we're breaking. Are you? We're breaking up on your end, or just on my end?
No, we get everything real good.
We hear you.
Anyway, somebody had sent me a very interesting quote. It's an extension of one that we're all familiar with, but it's a democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what to have for dinner. Liberty is a well-armed lamb.
That must be getting more popular, because as I was driving here today, I heard that on talk radio. Somebody said the same exact quote, and I thought it was fantastic.
Oh, I got to tell you this. Government's getting nervous. This happened in the late 90s. I got, a German film crew wants to come spend days with me about militia, and they're going to take. I've been getting emails from, what is it called? It's called metalflowersmedia.com. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Metal Flowers. Go look at that up. And these guys are doing a documentary on, Ernie, we hear you're the guy. You're going to hook us up with all the, the people that are going to go resist against the government. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Forward your thing. So I talked about it on the air. This came right after Vince Suprenowitz called me. There's a family up on the northern strip, north of the Grand Canyon. I mean, you want to go away from everything. You're out in the middle of nothing. Coconino County has come up, and they're going to kick them off of their cabin. They've been there 10 years.
They don't have a certificate of occupancy.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
There's some little paperwork or something. And these guys are like, send in your Waco killers. So I'm just going, wow, how far away do you have to go to get away from the man? And then right when they're talking about all this stuff, then I start, we want to hear about the militia. Whatever. And I'm going, we are so tapped.
And these guys are up. These guys are up on the North Canyon, away from everything.
Yeah, 130 miles to get their mail.
Wow,
that's quite a walk.
Go ahead, Joe. I know you got some callers.
We do, and we definitely want to get to them. And just to let you guys know that are calling in, I see our lines are just all constantly blinking here. So I get the lines on hold till I get the questions addressed, so I don't end up with 60 questions here. Liz from Phoenix, it looks like, has the most important question out of everything for the day today. Is the good-looking bald guy single?
Oh!
I didn't hear that.
The question was:
He's talking about Wasden.
Is the good-looking bald guy single?
Well, thank you very much for that. But no, actually, I am not single. Actually, I've got a beautiful woman. But I do appreciate that. Thank you.
And I did tell her, go ahead and send an email to me with photos, and I'll go ahead and let you.
That's nice of you,
if
Joe.
you did that first, your answer might have changed.
Because I screen his photos. So the next one, Cheryl from Twin Falls. She says, what the heck are you talking about? Freedom? I'm free, and I'm not a libertarian. You're all nuts. What are you all talking about? I mean, I think she's at home.
Well, Joe, maybe she is free. I mean, maybe she lives without having any of her income taken by the government. Maybe she lives free of all regulation. Maybe, for example, the water in her toilet is not regulated by the federal government. If she's managed to accomplish that, like, for example, maybe she's in charge of her own body. Maybe she can smoke a joint without any fear of the someone from the government with a shiny badge and a gun and coming to take her away and put her in a cage to live for many years because she's in control of her body. And I would like to know from her, where does she live, where she's living free to control her own destiny?
Heck, man, we're on the train.
Yeah, where is that?
This is something I now that Butler's on the line, I'd like to get Ernie and Marc in on this too. Something
I think this is a good point at which to make the distinction between freedom and liberty, as I usually do. And that is that freedom is an interior process. It's a process of that comes from within yourself, a sense of existential, if you will, wholeness, of integrity, of being in control of your own thoughts and in terms of your own opinions of the world, so forth. It goes back to some of the ideas that were generated. The author's name is just slipping my mind right now. Man's Search for Meaning. His experiences in Nazi concentration camps. And he said that the people that survived were the ones who had a very strong sense of truth, of what is right and wrong, and so forth. They did not allow others to define reality for them. And so the whole notion of freedom really comes from that kind of process. Liberty, on the other hand, I've thought of as a condition in which people who are free can live together in society. So that the idea that somehow or other you can have a condition of liberty without individuals going through the process of freedom is just, it's not workable. This is why, a lot of people who thought, well, maybe we could just sneak Ron Paul into the White House, then we'll have a condition of liberty. Not if the minds of most people are not prepared for that.
It always comes back to the same thing, Butler. We got to change hearts and minds. If we're going to have a free society, if we're going to have people who live together in real freedom, we got to change hearts and minds. It's not about passing some law. It's not, like you say, it's not about sneaking in Ron Paul.
The heart and mind that is most needful of change is myself. This is the problem. Mark Twain had a great line that said, nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits. And I think that we tend to operate, even libertarians tend to operate on the premise that we've got all this figured out. The rest of humanity hasn't figured it out, so we need to help them figure it out. And I think we're going at it in a backward fashion when we do that. I think that we become the kind of people that our principles reflect. Leonard Reed got into this years ago, that in his book Elements of Leadership, that we become, that our life manifests itself as an expression of the principles that we espouse. So that people will start coming around and say, what's with you? How did you get this way? Why are you so happy? Why are you so well adjusted, or whatever you want to call it? Why do you live as well as you do? And then they start taking an interest in what it is that's going on within the individual that creates this environment.
Be a good example of freedom first. I know Mike had a question he wanted to get in here.
Yeah, the caller reminded me of this, the caller that called in and thinks we're all nuts. I wanted Butler.
That was the woman who thought you were the good-looking bald.
I don't think so. I think it was
someone else. All
that was her sister.
Well, I may be nuts, too. That's
just
true.
Checking.
I heard many voices and they're drowning each other out.
Butler, I'm sure you've dealt with this a lot longer than we have. Nuts. It's like we're having to sell freedom to people. Don't you find this kind of amazing that people defend their masters? It's sort of like Stockholm syndrome. That people have, where they actually defend their captors, at a point where they start actually becoming attracted to their captors and defending them. And I think that's what most people suffer from, is a form of Stockholm syndrome when it comes to because you can start talking and people start calling in, they're almost mad at you. How dare you, say these things? We're free, like this woman. We're free. How dare you say we're not free? Well, we're not free. And it's so that's, I know you probably dealt with that a lot longer than we all have here.
Well, I think you always could ask the question, and this would be the question I would have responded to the woman in Montana with, if you were free, and I don't know who she is, maybe she is, but free to do what? Free in what sense? What does it mean to be free?
Butler, Mike and I once got into an argument with a guy over at the gym about freedom, and I'll never forget this, and I know Mike's already shaking his head because he remembers very vividly this discussion. And this guy said, "You guys are nuts. I'm for true freedom." And we said, "What's true freedom?" And he said, "True freedom is the right to do what it is you are supposed to do."
Government allows.
Well, in that sense, the people in Nazi Germany were free.
Yeah. They were free to walk into the ovens, yes.
Yeah, the people who were in concentration camps in Nazi Germany were free because they did exactly what the government told them to do. Go get on the train and get off the train and go do all these other things.
This is one thing, Butler. I want to get back to what my original question was, because being a university professor and having so many minds that you influence, this has been a theme that I've been screaming about for a while, and just in the last 3 weeks, there's been a lot of progress on this. Elon Musk, that's done SpaceX, he wants to, nobody knows this, but he wants to have 80,000 people a year colonizing Mars. That's what all of these spaceships are for.
Can we start with the Republicans and the Democrats?
No. This is my point. Peter Diamandis, the guy that did the X Prize, they started a thing called Singularity University to get graduate students to start thinking about the future and all this kind of stuff. And the thing that they're talking about is innovation stagnation. It is the result of a conscious goose mind control that starts at like here in Arizona. We had Janet Napolitano as governor. Her number one thing, all else be damned. I mean, she signed gun legislation, liberalized all kinds of stuff. One thing, she wanted payer-funded preschool down to 3 years old.
Getting a broken up message here. It's like every other word is going.
Well, it's because I'm being clipped because I'm so loud, probably. The Janet Napolitano wanted one thing. She wanted to have preschool, government-funded preschool.
Let's get the government to start indoctrinating our kids at age 3. Let's get them standing up mindlessly, saluting the flag, pledging allegiance, repeating things they don't understand, indoctrinating them about concepts.
It's already had a long-term effect on our entire society.
Right. I mean, think about what patriotism is today, Ernie. Today, patriotism is supporting the government no matter what the government does, when really patriotism is holding the government in check. Patriotism is looking at the government as an enemy of freedom, the way our founders looked at the government. The government would needed to be kept in a cage, right? Chain it down with the chains of the Constitution. Joe's going to have a heart attack if we don't get to some callers.
Well, yeah, I just want to take some more callers, but we had Bill from Kona, Hawaii, that should be able to get you set on the right track here. Okay,
good.
Mark? He wants to let you know that, well, actually, he wants to know first, do you really think we need to prep for some crazy end-of-the-world conspiracy theory? Because we are free now. The world's not going to end. Now it's done, and we have Obama. Now we're truly free.
Look, I mean, I've said many times, I don't tell free people what to do. I mean, free people can do whatever they want to do. I don't think that the Mayan problem. I don't know about any of these other things, but I think that there probably is going to be some kind of a financial problem. And the reason that's going to happen is, I mean, the natural state of affairs, we don't get into these problems, but when you have a government printing up money out of control and spending money out of control, I used to say like a drunken sailor, but, I spent years in the Marine Corps and I was around lots of sailors, and I don't want to insult the drunken sailors out there. I mean, the government's far worse than a drunken sailor can only spend the money he's got, right?
Well, Butler, weigh in on that. I'm curious what you think. I mean, I tell my listeners, look, you just need to keep breathing in and out longer than the other guys. Kate, and we're going to go storm some rampart somewhere, but it doesn't hurt to have non-perishable foods. It doesn't hurt to have, some ammunition, some firearms to defend your food, maybe some silver. What do you advocate just to help you keep breathing in and out longer than the bad guys? Where do you think this is going?
Well, for one thing, Ernie, you've got to stop breathing out. That's you're dispelling all this carbon dioxide and it's just
save the planet, kill myself.
When people pull those kind of nonsense on me, I usually say, well, why is it that you hate plants so much? Why do you want to destroy trees and grass and bushes and things of that sort? Oh, what do you mean? Well, what do you think plants live on? They live on carbon dioxide. Oh, and where do they get that? Well, they get that from other living beings that take in oxygen, which the plants produce, and expel the carbon dioxide. We've had a wonderful market system, if you want to look at it that way, between plant life and animal life. Plants produce the oxygen that we require to live on, and we, in the process, produce carbon dioxide. Oh yeah, but you're going to have global warming. So what? I've never yet had someone tell me what problem is with regard to global warming.
You have too long a growing season.
Butler, are you at all concerned about? Are you at all concerned about a possible economic collapse? I mean, look, governments.
We're in one right now, and I think this idea of going over the fiscal cliff, as these people like to talk about, is simply a way of saying there are consequences to what we do, and one of the consequences is if you keep messing around with the economic system, you're going to create disharmonies that are eventually going to have to be dealt with. And, of course, the people who want to deal with them on the same basis as what created the problem in the first place.
Print more money. We need more money. More money. Give it to me and my friends. That's another thing. The Ron Paul thing, when they did the audit the Fed, I really thought there was a lot of times that you thought people were going to rise up. You know, the Downing Street memo, or no weapons of mass destruction, or you have a lot of. But then all of a sudden, you found that the Federal Reserve is $20-something trillion that they gave foreign countries and banks, and it just and.
Well, you could say the same thing about some of these ongoing wars. I mean, it's kind of surprising to me when you look at things like the government spends its money. I mean, they spend so much money on national defense, and you say to yourself, now the Republicans are all upset because they're going to be cuts in national defense, and they're upset. I mean, it makes me feel like, are we at a world war or something? I mean, it seems like, if you read George Orwell's
War on Terror,
if you read George Orwell's 1984, I mean, could it be many more on point than what we have right now?
We've always been at war with Eurasia.
Yes, we've always been at war.
Well, this is I think the real value of what Ron Paul did was, I don't think there's anyone who had the genuine belief that somehow or other Ron was going to be occupying the White House come January 20th. But what he did do, and what I think is a very important thing to do, is to raise questions. He got people thinking about things that they didn't think about before. 10 years ago, most people probably didn't even know there was such a thing as a Federal Reserve, or what it did. And now, people are questioning it. Ordinary people, it's not. In fact, it's usually more the ordinary people than the well-educated ones.
Gold standard are now part of a discussion. I remember back when what Steve Forbes was talking about the gold standard years and years ago when he was running for president, and he was just painted as a complete wingnut. Of course, had we gone back to a gold standard at that point, the government would not have been able to continually print money the way they have all this time. So, yeah, Ron Paul made it more of a national debate. I mean, he stood up as a Republican and questioned the ever-expanding American empire, and do we need to be in all these foreign wars, and do we need to be mingling in all these other countries? And even I think he did a very good job, even as a Republican, talking about social issues, even the question of marriage. He would just say, which struck a chord with me, hey, look, why is it the federal government's business to even be involved in marriage? I mean, and if you don't like two guys being married, then okay, then I guess if you're a guy, don't marry another guy. And if you don't want to recognize two guys being married, then don't. I mean, if you do, then do. Why is this a federal issue?
Or why would you, as an individual, want to have the government define?
Isn't that disgusting, Butler, that the people would look to the government and get some slip from the government to say, look at me, the government's granted a license that, of course, I paid for, and now, officially, the government has blessed my relationship with my wife. I mean, to me, it's sort of disgusting. It's demeaning. And, I mean, imagine if the government decided that maybe as a new revenue source, they would license dating relationships. Maybe you need to have a license to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and if you don't, you're really not in a relationship.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, to anybody who saw Braveheart, the king used to bless marriages.
Yeah, I will bless this marriage into my bed on the first night, prima nocte.
And you know what? But what's interesting about that is lots of people went along with that because it was the authority of the day.
They do go along with it. I got a forced menage a trois with Uncle Sam the first night of my marriage here in America with this license thing. I mean, I moved from state to state, and the contract changes. I got this first night, prima nocte with Uncle Sam right now. I'm like, wait, I figured that out after I first got married to Donna, my wife. We've been married 27, 28, I don't know, years.
You're
anyway,
in trouble now.
That's her job. But the thing is I go, wait a minute, time out. We move from this state to this state and the contract changed?
Why is it a foregone conclusion? Why does everybody just accept that the government needs to be involved in marital relationships? Why is it that people just accept that in order for them to be legitimate, the government must be involved?
Well,
For the same
when
reason-
it started. If you got black men wanting to marry white women, we got to have a license.
For the same reason they expect the government to bless them having a dog or anything else. So,
Well,
same
Sheila
reason.
from Oshkosh, Wisconsin would like to know. So what you're saying is it's okay to do drugs like heroin, cocaine, pot, and she says, is it also okay to... Oh. Looks like we lost him. Looks like we lost our professor there.
Sorry, Butler.
All right, so the question is it okay to do drugs?
And
then
is it okay to be in the KKK?
You know, look, both of those things are okay so long as you do them peacefully.
And you don't make me be in them.
Why is this so confusing for people? Look, what was her name, Sheila?
Sheila from Oshkosh.
Sheila, let me say this to you. Sheila, my friend, if you're an adult and you're competent of sound mind, aren't you in charge of yourself? Can't you be in charge of your own body? Can't you do whatever it is you want with your own body so long as it's peaceful? Do whatever you want, Sheila. Stand up. Be a good American. Take charge of yourself. Take charge of your life. You're in charge of you. If you want to use your body anyway, if you want to abuse your body, if you want to be stupid and use dangerous drugs, it's your body. And if you want to associate, it's like the Ku Klux Klan, and stand around and talk about how much you hate blacks and talk about how much you hate Jews. That's your business. You got a right to be a bigoted idiot if you want, so long as you're peaceful. The second you trespass on someone else's property, the second you hurt another person, that's where the law should get involved. Why doesn't this make sense? Doesn't make sense to somebody. I would love to hear why. Why is it we libertarians, we people of freedom, are so crazy when all we're saying is you're in charge of you and I'm in charge of me and you get to be in charge of you, and if you trespass on me, then there's a problem. If I trespass on you, there's a problem. Why is that so confusing?
A few quick comments here, and I'll take some more calls. Rocket Man from Toronto says, amen to you freedom fighters.
Go Rocket Man.
Rocket Man.
And you know what, Rocket Man? The time is now. Light up the rocket. It's time to fight for freedom. We're going to lose our country. Stand up and join us. Do whatever it is that you do well. If it's speak, if it's read, if it's write, if it's do a radio show, if it's talk to your neighbor, do whatever you do well, Rocket Man, and let's all promote freedom. It's in all of our self-interests.
Then we've got Freedom Manny from Minneapolis says, this show rocks. Keep up the good message.
All right, man.
Same to you, Freedom Manny. Ditto. Get on board, man. It's time. We're going off the freedom cliff.
There we
That's
go.
It's a freedom. We need to
Liberty,
take some action.
Too big to fail.
Sherry, Tad, and Mo in a three-way love triangle out in there in San Francisco said, Mark is one of the best freedom fighters anywhere, and we love you.
Well, we love you right back. But you know the same thing. Let me say this, too, because I talk to a lot of different groups all the time. And when I talk to the gay groups, I go out there, and they think I'm going to give them a talk about gay rights. And, of course, I agree with gay rights. Do whatever you want. I don't care. Don't bother anybody. But that's not so impressive to me if you're gay and you're for gay rights. Big deal. I understand that. How do you feel about gun rights? How do you feel about pot smokers? How do you feel about motorcycle riders not having to wear helmets? And I say the same thing to these other groups. The pot smokers who are for legalized pot smoking, big deal. You're not a freedom guy. Step up to the big leagues of freedom.
But here's where it always comes, Mark. But what about the children? Okay. Now this is when the education woman who brought up the first one. I remember this becoming an issue when we were advocating for separation of child and state. You know, that you get to, at the very least, one of the things that was being brought up even by the Republicans at the time here in Arizona was that we were going to have education vouchers. And that way the parents got to be the administration. It didn't go through and filtered and half of it went to some, hot tubs for administrators at their district, whatever the heck. The students and the parents became the administrators. I want my child to go to this Ku Klux Klan preschool. Okay, so that was the argument. They go, well, you're going to have the parents get to decide. Well, then they're going to determine, what kind of salute and pledge that they do, and they could be wearing little hoods, and they could. Like the government doesn't do it now? Is that what you're saying?
To me, Ernie, that's part of being in the big leagues of freedom.
That's right.
Parents may teach their kids things that I don't agree with. That's life in the big city. It's not the role of government to step in and force parents to teach their kids things that we agree with. Because the truth is, we don't all agree on things, right? Some of us are for creationism. Some of us are for evolution. Some of us think they're both compatible. Some of us think they're not. You teach your kid whatever you think is best, but let's all agree to one thing. Let's at least be peaceful. Let's at least not coerce each other. That's all we're really saying, right? And didn't the Beatles say, just give peace a chance? I was at a Beatles tribute recently. Tracy and I went there, and I watched all these people standing up there and cheering. All we are saying, and I wondered to myself, how many of them really believed it? Because it's not so hard to say, let's give peace a chance, or I'm for freedom. It's not so hard to say that. What's a lot harder is to mean it. Do you really mean it? And I don't mean, do you mean it when it's easy? Do you mean it when your neighbor wants to send their kid to the Ku Klux Klan school? Or when your neighbor wants to teach their kid something stupid? Or when your neighbor wants to put drugs in their body that are harmful to them and they're a competent adult?
This
That's
is one thing.
where we find out if you're in the big leagues or you're a baby for freedom.
See, this
Step
is where,
up.
Mark and I, we didn't do this disclaimer. We're like partners in the Freedom Summit that we've been doing for a decade. We have every year we'll have big names.
We're the only two guys who could put up with each other.
This is put this way. They always get on me about Ernie. He talks a lot. Except when he's around Mark. Mark wins. And it's a big debate. It's a big debate. But the one thing is that when we did the Freedom Summit every year, started in 3 weeks after 9/11.
It did.
And it was right after that. And we had all these people for the past decade, but we kind of held off last couple of years. We may do one this next year. And the reason is we were predicting what was coming. We're going, look, everybody, you need to prepare for this. All our speakers, big speakers, Ron Paul 3 times at our summits, Peter Schiff, James Bovard, Butler, Schaffer, Vince Suprenowitz, Nathaniel Brandon, Lou Rockwell, Walter Block. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And it was all about, this is what's coming. Here we go. Get ready. Strap in. It's going to get rough. Well, now it's here. So what are we going to go? How come you didn't do a summit? I go, what are we going to do? Say, I told you so? I mean, is that what we're going to told you so?
So now we're doing other things, and we're trying to get these people who are calling in saying, yeah, go. We say, no. Right back at you. It's time to stand up. It's time to not be quiet anymore.
And I think that's what this next one we're going to do is going to be. It's going to be selected individuals and how we're going to survive after.
Well, you know what?
There is an after.
I'll tell you what, Ernie. Sarah from Salt Lake City wants to send some bike riders right to your homes and talk to you a little bit because she says gays, premarital sex, caffeine, drugs, gambling, etc., you're all going to hell. I'm going to be in my kingdom with my family of quality standing. You should be ashamed to be broadcasting this. You need to become LDS.
What I would say back to my friend. What I'd say back to my friend in Salt Lake is this, and I am just repeating words that come from the very important Joseph. Said the following: teach them correct principles, but let them govern themselves. And what I would say to her is, do you really believe that? Do you really follow that teaching? Because if you do, you're a libertarian. Let them govern themselves. Teach them whatever you want, but let them govern themselves.
My sister, Mormon. The whole side of my mother's family, Mormon. My grandmother, part of the Lehigh invasion in the Mesa, Mormon. She was the genealogy, what do they call it, the librarian for all of the tracing of everybody. My uncle, 15 kids, Mormon. So I am like, this is, I understand, I get it, I know it, I'm open to it. But let me tell you, we all got along just fine because they understood that I would fall on the sword for their right to be however they wanted.
Super important point, Ernie. And I made this point last show, but I think it bears repeating. I am not Mormon, but I am the very first guy to stand up and protect the Mormon church or any other church that's peaceful from any kind of intrusion by the government, even though I'm not Mormon, right? So isn't that, to me, that's the big leagues of freedom. Can you stand up for the rights of other people who do things you don't do, maybe even don't approve of, don't think are wise or warranted or healthy? Can you stand up and defend those people's rights to peacefully do things you don't like?
No, wait. Before you go, I got to do this. You wouldn't believe how much crap these guys give me. of a hardwiring belief that there's any kind of a connection between people, spiritual, anything. I mean, they are on my case. Okay?
You get to believe whatever you want, Ernie.
My wife, very Christian, constantly. Mike Wazin over here, the super atheist, and everything, but I'm giving him crap because he's got the special woman in his life right now, big Christian, okay? He's learned to kind of...
Okay, what about those Patriots?
You know what? All right, so Joe, who else we got? Let's get this on. Joe's got about 100 callers waiting.
We've got Rod from Chandler says, so my 18-year-old son loves meth. He's an addict. Should I go and buy some for him, or should I just tell him it's okay?
Well, I'll tell you what. I can't tell you how to deal with your 18-year-old son because it sounds like you're a big boy. But I've got kids, and I can tell you what I would do. I would talk to my kids very strongly, and I'd explain to them, as long as they're minors, right, then I would tell them how they're going to run. So I'm getting to that. So if they're minors, then they're not in charge of themselves. We're in charge of them. I would still want to explain to them why using meth is a horrible idea. But if someone else is a competent adult, you don't have a right to exert your will over them. If you've done a good job as a parent,
I wouldn't enable them.
Yeah,
I wouldn't help them.
Absolutely,
I wouldn't make
not.
it available.
No, I would do everything to discourage them. But at the end of the day, if your kid is a competent adult, then he for his life,
tough love.
Not you.
Over there, man. Go away.
Hopefully you did a good job as a parent and you did everything you could to teach them that using meth is a bad thing.
I have 4 children, 4 grandchildren, and the drug thing is a very important thing. We were very open, very libertarian about it, educational. We thought that education and talking to them was the most effective way of being able to keep us from having to live a life and all that kind of crap.
But so I would say to Rod, I imagine for a moment that the mayor of New York thinks that big sugary drinks are really bad, and so he's against that, and he thinks those are bad. So, Rod, how would you feel if some other adult said to you, "Hey, look, carbonated beverages are really bad. I'm going to coerce you from using those carbonated beverages"?
No, I'll give you a perfect example. This is happening in the United Kingdom right now. There are precursors, there are tags, there are signs of what might be wrong with your children in the future. We can see that they're going to be drug addicts. We can see that they're going to be criminals. We can see. So we are putting television cameras in your home.
Fantastic.
This is where this goes. Yeah. If you want to have some kind of one size fits all and how they're supposed to be, well, why don't you just turn them over to the man?
Well, look, things that are dangerous and that are unhealthy, like, for example, skydiving, not something I've ever done. I got some friends who have done it. They say they love it. I know Ernie's wife, Donna's done it before. And
went yesterday.
All right, loved it. It's not for me. I might want to discourage Donna. I might say, hey, Donna, jumping out of a plane, it doesn't seem like the safest thing to do. It doesn't seem super wise. But, at the end of the day, Donna's a big girl, and she gets to decide for herself whether she wants to jump out of a plane and risk her life on a parachute opening or not. If she wants to rock climb, she even married Ernie, so she could do whatever.
Do I pull the cord or not pull the cord?
Yeah, but that's the essence of being free. You gotta swallow the bitter pill that other competent adults, they get to decide for themselves among the endless choices of things that are dangerous and unsafe and harmful and unhealthy and addictive and bad and could end your life early. And so the question back to you, Rod, is: are you really for freedom? Are you really big? Follow the bitter pill to say, I respect the rights of other people to do things that I know damn sure are going to be bad for them. But they're peaceful. As long as they're peaceful. Now, if your son uses meth or for reason starts trespassing on another person, absolutely, that's where the law ought to get involved. There's no problem with that. Nobody's saying use meth or use alcohol or use any other drug and then go endanger another person. Nobody's saying that.
I want to bring this up. There's one thing that Marc did. He wrote, and it was during the Levolution, right in the middle of the 08, 07, 08. You wrote the article, Legalize. Here's a criminal defense attorney making all his money on it being criminalized. He's like, take away all of my, big money. Take away the drug war. Man, I'd have to live in a smaller house,
Well, I thought I was actually in a very good position, close to a unique position, to actually make this argument because I make a lot of money off the drug war.
And you have young children. You're a big health nut. You go into the gym every morning. I remember, heck, in your bio, you can bench press 300 pounds. You don't do that well, maybe you do on meth. I don't know. But the thing is that he was in a specific unique position to be able to go to Constitution Days, all the different right-wing events and so on, and we passed those out by the gazillion. Why? Because people needed to understand that the effects of the drug war are far more detrimental to our health, they're far more detrimental to our freedoms, far more detrimental to our country, our existence, our finances, everything, than the actual drug itself.
And how many people, Ernie, just as an aside, asked me to just change article, right?
Because it said legalized methamphetamine with an exclamation point. They go, can't you at least put a question mark in there or something?
Yeah, put a question mark. Can you change it to, hey, end the drug war? No. Because, my thought is, if you're not big enough to get past the, just don't have it inside of you to read something that you just know you disagree with, you're not my audience.
And that just goes segues with, one time I was doing radio here at a morning show, and I'm going down to see Marc as a judge. Okay, he's pro tem. He's going to be a judge, so I couldn't get down there fast enough. I got to get a picture of him in a robe, man. That was going to be good. On my way down there, he calls. He goes, "They already kicked me off. This morning, done. Hey, it's already over. Let me tell you what my scientific experiment is on the half-life of about half an hour, okay? And the reason is because he said, look, I'm not hearing these victimless crimes. These drug cases, I put them off on this other judge doesn't. I'll take the real crimes. And then he did a minute entry explaining why. And it was so powerful. I've never seen the Supreme Court move this fast.
Within an hour.
With Supreme Court Chief Justice, get that SOB off of the bench and out of there. And then we got lots of press.
And Ernie, I should say, you can read both my legalized methamphetamine article as well as my experience as a judge, which is under the strangely titled article, My Contribution to Science, and the 5-page minute be issued in the Superior Court in Maricopa County, Arizona, at my website, which is attorneyforfreedom.com. And you can always get a hold of me through my website, Attorney for Freedom. How do people get a hold of you, Ernie?
Freedoms with an S, freedomsphoenix.com. Or we have a magazine online. We're in our 20th edition now, freedomsphoenixeasing.com. Oh, this freedom thing, Marc and I have been doing this for decades, and we see it trending our way. And that's kind of what Butler Schaffer was about. I'm sorry we lost Butler, because his whole thing is that freedom's trending this way. I mean, humanity marches on.
We really are. In fact, Mike had just sent me an article yesterday. Some guy, I think it's in Washington. Yeah. This guy's out in front. He's a sports bar owner, and he's the first guy in Washington to say, hey, guess what?
Up!
You want to come in here and smoke a joint? And then he created a whole new appetizer menu called the 420 menu, $4.20 for each one of his appetizers, and no reports of
and
any
he's
problem.
So far ahead of the curve, they don't even know how to handle it.
Yeah.
They don't even know if it's illegal, if it's not illegal.
Yeah, I remember reading the article. His whole motivation was, hey, man, I got to make money.
He's a capitalist. Yeah. He's a capitalist.
I see a marketing opportunity here.
Yeah.
Bring it on now.
And
he's 60-something years old.
How ridiculous that people put up with this stuff in the States, to have such regulation from government that's choking them off. And all you got to do is take a look, for example, in Texas, where they got a much better free market than we do here in Arizona. And why do you think business is booming in Texas? Why are there more jobs? Why is standard of living going up in Texas?
All you need is a little bit more freedom. Just a teeny bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to improve your life, if you want to improve your standard of living, you bust out some freedom. You bust out some free market capitalism. Let free people be free. Let them innovate. Let them bring products to market, even if they're things you don't like, right? I mean, even if it's drugs, even if it's prostitution, even if it's gambling, if you don't like any of that stuff, don't participate in it. Nobody's got a right to trespass any of that stuff on you.
It's changing. Generation Next, this is something that, Butler, I remember an event you put on in 2000 where Butler which came up, and they were talking about this very thing. And he's like, it's a trending thing. Now, Ben would say if you were in the Wausau ghetto in, the late 30s, you probably didn't feel the trend was going your way.
Right.
But yeah, humanity marches on. I can see that in spite of all the controls and all the education, all the crap that's going on and how they're dumbing us down, that they're busting out anyway.
Who would have thought a guy like us, a Ron Paul guy who we met years ago personally, privately, we know is a real freedom guy, who would have thought a guy like that would be up in the presidential debates?
Me.
But look at that happened. That actually happened, right? We're moving in the right direction. Despite all the dark clouds of big government intrusion everywhere, there's still a shining ray of light for freedom. And there are lots of people out there, some of them listening to this show. Bring it on, freedom people. Get up, out for freedom. Do it for yourself. Do it for your country.
That went without. I mean, I had to take a second of silence there. I thought.
I mean it. You know, I look, did Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine and Sam Adams, did they start this all for nothing? I mean, did they start this all to come back and see now a government $16 trillion in debt that regulates everything? Would they be happy with that? Would they at least like to know that there are some people standing up and saying, hey, you know, these principles that you guys were talking about, that you fought the American Revolution, that you signed on the Declaration of Independence and sent that thing over to King George III?
It's all inspirational stuff. I mean, you ran for U.S. Senate. Do you think you were going to win, Mark?
No.
Is that why you were running?
I ran like I do everything, including this radio show, for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's exactly what Butler Schaffer was talking about, to do my best, to do my part to win hearts and minds for freedom. What are you guys all doing? That's my question.
Waiting on you now.
Waiting on you.
All right. Well, I think that about does it for the hour.
Hey, thanks for coming in, guys. Sure. Thanks to Butler, if you're out there listening. Tracy, she'll be on next time. She's going to do the whole show by herself next time.
Say hi, Tracy. At least say hi.
Hi, guys.
There you go.
And make sure you guys tune in each and every week. It's just going to get better. Thank you for all you chatters out there. I know you've got a few people converted out there now who really are thinking about freedom in the correct way.
Let's try to get to more callers next week, too.
Absolutely.
Let's try to get them all in.
Absolutely. All right, well, we'll take it from here. Thanks again, Mark, the attorney for freedom.
Thanks for having us, buddy. Awesome
right.
job, as usual.
We're out.
Freedom is the answer. What's the question? You have been listening to the Attorney for Freedom radio show, hosted by the original man of peace and high-profile attorney for freedom, Mark Victor. See you next week, same time, for another dose of freedom. Until then, peace out.
Are you planning on starting a new business in this economy? As a new business, you know you'll need to watch every single dollar. Before you make any decisions on phone service, call Zentris Communications at 1-877-ZENTRIS. That's 1-877-936-8727.